Stuffed. Written by Eric Walters. Published by Orca Book Publishers. Narrated by Iambic Productions.
Chapter 1. The credits started rolling up the screen. Behind the credits were pictures of people. Overwhelmingly overweight people with rolls of fat bulging over jeans and busting out of tops, with triple chins and wearing clothes big enough to be circus tents. The lights came on and Mrs. Fletcher walked to the front of the classroom, turned off the DVD, and clicked off the TV. "That was quite an interesting documentary," she said. It was called Stuffed, and it was all about Frankie's, the gigantic fast food chain. It was all about how their food was filled with fat and chemicals and how eating it could make people overweight, unhealthy, sick, and could basically kill them. "Comments?" Mrs. Fletcher asked. "That was disgusting," Julia snapped. Julia was one of my best friends. "Just disgusting." "It was pretty gross," Oswald agreed. He was my best friend. 2 weeks ago, he might have agreed or he might have disagreed with Julia. Now he did nothing but agree with anything and everything she said. 2 weeks ago, he and Julia had stopped being friends and started being boyfriend and girlfriend. "It made me hungry," Trevor said. A chorus of laughter followed his words. "Hungry?" Julia demanded, sounding not only surprised but offended. "How could you possibly even think about eating after what we just saw?" "I like Frankie's food," Trevor said. "It's tasty and big, really big. And I like big food." Trevor looked like he could have been in the documentary. Julia opened her mouth to answer, but Mrs. Fletcher cut her off. "What do other people think?" she asked. I thought that was pretty smart on her part, cutting Julia off before she said something about Trevor that we were all probably thinking, but nobody should have said. Other people joined into the debate. It was creating a lot of opinions, but then again, it was a pretty strong documentary. The film was about some guy who lived on nothing but Frankie's food. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He ate nothing but Frankie's. Sausages and coffee and hot cakes and hash browns for breakfast, burgers and fries and onion rings and Coke and root beer for lunch and dinner. Every day, every meal for 60 days. By the end, he was fat and sluggish and depressed. "What was the most interesting thing you learned?" Mrs. Fletcher asked the class. "That they put sugar in everything, including the French fries and onion rings," a girl said. "I couldn't believe the amount of sugar that guy had eaten," another boy said. "It was like a small mountain." There had been a scene in the movie where sugar, equal to all the sugar he'd eaten, was piled on a table. The amount of sugar was so massive it slipped off the edges of the table. "What grossed me out the most was all that fat," Julia said. "That was sick," Oswald agreed. "And I don't mean that in a good way." After the sugar scene, they had glass jars filled with greasy, slimy fat, equal to the amount he'd eaten during the 2 months. Those were both wonderful visual displays. "How many people are now less likely to eat at Frankie's?" Mrs. Fletcher asked. 3/4 of the class put up their hands. Those who didn't raise their hands, could you explain why it didn't affect you in the same way? "Frankie's food tastes the best," a boy said. "Yeah," Trevor agreed, "especially the triple bacon cheeseburger melt." Trevor's eyes were closed, as if he was picturing the burger in his mind. I wouldn't have been surprised if a string of drool had come out of his mouth. That was actually my favorite burger, too. I liked it, but I thought Trevor was in love with it. "And you still would eat one of those after watching the film?" Julia questioned. "Why not?" Trevor asked. "Did you fall asleep during the movie?" Julia demanded. "Julia," Mrs. Fletcher cautioned. "But Mrs. Fletcher, that's the very worst thing on the whole menu," Julia protested. "Each one has over 1,200 calories and more fat than anybody should eat in an entire day. That guy gained 37 pounds because of that burger." "It wasn't just the burgers," Trevor said. "And besides, it's not like I'm going to eat there every day." "Trevor has a point," Mrs. Fletcher said. "Now, this documentary focused on just one fast food chain.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?